Questionnaire distribution. Electronic delivery is quickly becoming the most common method of distribution. If mailing, there are some concerns. 1. Controlling costs. Bulk mail rates should be considered. Length of questionnaire, i.e., weight of mailing, can be an issue. 2. High return rate. Please make sure to use self-addressed, stamped envelope to increase high return rate. Or you can use postage paid, business reply envelopes. Use good mailing list. Adopt follow-up strategy. Conducting questionnaire. 1. Conduct pilot study first. 2. Receive expert review. 3. Test with small sample. Does this provide the information you want? These are various types of interview methods. You probably at some time have had a telemarketer call you and want to ask you questions about a specific topic. That is an example of a phone interview. A personal interview is where the researcher meets in a face-to-face manner with the participants. Typically, the interview is recorded either with a tape recorder or a video recorder. There are 3 different types of personal interviews that can be conducted. Structured. With a structured interview, the researcher has a set of questions that he/she asks. The researcher does not deviate from these questions. Semi-structured. With a semi-structured interview, the researcher has a set of questions that he/she asks. However, when the participant respondent makes an interesting comment, the researcher may ask follow-up questions about that specific comment. So even though the researcher has a set of questions, answers may trigger other questions by the researcher for clarification purposes. Unstructured. With an unstructured interview, the researcher has a starting question or 2, but most of the questions are generated as a result of the participants' responses. The researcher often just lets the participant talk. This type of data collection is often done in historical research. Focus group interview is a technique of doing group interviews. 5 to 8 participants are interviewed at the same time. Typically there are 2 interviewers, one asking the questions and one taking notes. In a focus group, sometimes one participant's response will trigger the thinking of another participant, therefore allowing the research to gain a richer understanding. Phone interview. It is very common in marketing research, but not used much in exercise sciences research. Personal interview. It is applicable if the sample is small and accessible. We can use structured, semi-structured, or unstructured interview. We basically record information. With focus group interview, we interview groups of people. It requires skilled facilitator. An interview schedule or guide contains the questions to be read to the respondent during an interview, as well as a place for recording the answers. The Delphi technique is often used for position statements. A group of experts meet and discuss the topic. Typically there is someone that is designated as the note-taker. The group meets and creates a document. Then at a later time, they meet again and make modifications to the document. This continues until all of the experts agree on the document. The document is then the final product. Are the pros and cons of face-to-face interview and phone interview? Face-to-face interviews. More adaptable, versatile. Includes observation, facial expressions. 100% return rate. Phone interviews. Less expensive / more economical. More candid on sensitive questions. Developmental research study changes in behavior across years. It focuses on cross-age comparisons. For example, researchers can compare how far children can jump when they are 6, 8, 10 years old. There are two basic approaches. Longitudinal follow the same individuals over time. It is expensive and time-consuming. It is powerful because the changes in behavior across the time span of interest are seen in the same people. For example, 5 years for the example listed above. Cross-sectional select different participants at each age level. It is usually less time-consuming to carry out. It is more efficient, but a limitation called cohort problem exists. Are all the age groups really from the same population? Asked another way, are the environmental circumstances that affect jumping performance for 6-year-olds the same as the 10-year-olds were 6? Although both designs have some problems, they are the only means available to study development. Logical problems exist. Unrepresentative scores called outliers, which frequently result from shorter attention spans, distraction, and lack of motivation to do the tasks. Do plan the testing situation, remove distraction, be aware of outliers and retest. Unclear semantics selecting appropriate words in explaining a task to various age groups of children. Lack of reliability in younger children's performance. Make sure young children understand the task, enjoy doing it. Statistical problems. ANOVA assume that groups have equal variance as pilot work. Protecting participants. Grant permission for minors, consent from them. Study a single case is studied in depth to reach a greater understanding about other similar cases. In other words, it is in-depth understanding of a single situation or phenomenon. It is useful in many disciplines. Specifically, it has been used considerably in the health sciences and to some extent in exercise science, sports science, and physical education. This type of study can help us gain understanding about similar cases. The research question is, what is this a case of? Select subjects from whom you can learn the most. That is, the case is representative of many other such cases. These studies can be descriptive, interpretive, or evaluative. Descriptive: better understanding of present status. It presents a detailed picture of the phenomena but does not attempt to test or build theoretical models. Interpretive: the major focus is to interpret the data in an effort to classify and conceptualize the information, and perhaps theorize about the phenomena. Evaluative is to use data to evaluate merit of some practice, program, movement, or event. Data sources include interviews, observations, and documents. Characteristics of the case study involves the collection and analysis of many sources of information. In some respects, the case study has some of the same features found in historical research. It provides insight and knowledge of a general nature for improved practices. Data analysis reduces massive amount of information to explain the case. Observational research: the researcher observe individuals' behavior and qualitatively or quantitatively analyze the observations. Some researchers claim that this yields more accurate data. What participants do, not what they say they do. It can be qualitative, narrative, quantitative. There are systematic instruments for observational research. Considerations in observational research. What behaviors will be observed? The outcome variables. Who will be observed? The number of participants. Where will the observations be conducted? Control and freedom from distractions. How many observations will be made? Also the number of observers. When will the observations be made? Time of the day of the week, phase in the learning experience. How will the observations be scored and evaluated? Narrative, tallying, interval method, duration method. Observational methods. Narrative: the research describes the observations as they occur. Called continual recording method. Frequency: the researcher records each occurrence of a clearly defined behavior within a certain time frame. Interval: records whether the behavior in question occurs in a certain interval of time. Duration: use a stopwatch or other timing device to record how much time a participant spends engaged in a particular behavior. Weaknesses of observational research. 1. Operational definitions of the study/the behaviors must be carefully defined and observable. 2. Requires much practice/inadequate training represents a major pitfall. 3. Certain behaviors cannot be evaluated as finely as some observation forms dictate. 4. The presence of the observer affects the participant's behavior. 5. Failure to use more than one observer/it is greatly expedited by having more than one observer. Correlational research explores relationships between variable and sometimes involves prediction of a criterion variable. May predict but does not establish cause-effect. It is descriptive because there is no manipulation. Also, the selection of an inadequate measure as a criterion in a prediction study is a common weakness in correlational research.